Hey everybody, this is AomIsHot22. Again, this is a new YouTube channel. My old YouTube channel I'm not able to get into as a result of the two-step authentication, whatever the fuck it is, verification stuff. Pretty high frequency 3-bet, however, against a recreational, I kind of just think it's a bit disastrous if I fucking end up like 3-betting this and he jams some reasonable frequency of like King Jack. I'm not having any leads on the flop. This is pretty high frequency raise, just using a half pot check raise with anything in my range that I decide to raise. I think at this SPO, honestly, I'm not really sure what the optimal strategies are here. I tend to think like, I don't know. I'm going to bet a third with everything in this SPR, but potentially that's not like the way to maximize against a recreational in this situation. Obviously, very high EV board texture for us. We're gonna have to like pitch a bunch of hands like A7 of hearts at some frequency. This needs to be a continue. This guy decides to shove. We have a call. Okay, he just decides to jam King 8. It's just really hard to find enough natural bluffs. Obviously, he can find jacks and Jack 10 and all that sort of thing. It's very easy to front door a bunch of hands. I am on the nitty side, and Chaiki may realize that I'm on the nitty side. And occasionally, like, bluff something like Jack 10 more often than he should, and vice versa. It's a board that he should just be playing very defensively on. He shouldn't have too many check raises to begin with. Rolling a 7, that's the higher number. I'm actually going to use a larger bet, but normally I just block this on the river. I almost always block this. Given that I rolled a 7, I want to have this at a very low frequency into a big betting range. Good way to balance out sizings and everything. We end up going pretty big with these big blind versus anybody 3-bet situations, barring BB versus small blind. Just a very polarized situation, whereas small blind versus big blind, it's a very linear situation where we're going nearly 20% of our range. Turn, this hand just mixes. Rolled a pretty low number. The king and the queen of diamonds are not amazing, but they're. We're basically actually blocking a lot of folds, but at the same time, we have reasonable EV, and he's going to find a lot of folds on the turn. Like, we're going to just have to bluff that at a decent frequency. Just a mixed strategy hand. We can't always like be so selective with having a spade in our hand. We thought we just jam this. Queen Jack 3, very, very strong board for the cutoff. Nookie should be defending a bunch of, and with the club, we end up getting to have a lot of bets on the turn with this combo. We're not opening deuces in the cutoff. We're maybe not even opening threes with three regulars behind, so we need to be bluffing this fairly often. Given the fact that out of position has a bunch of like ace 10 and 9-10, we don't really have to have so many overbets. For our range, it makes a lot of sense to have a bunch of like 2/3 bets and like pot bets, and I think going into the massive overbets, it's not a very logical thing in my opinion. Given that he's supposed to have all the 10-9 off, we don't have any. The nut advantage is, well, I mean, we're not having as many like straights as him essentially, so we need to be fairly careful. Now, I mean, of course, some of this will check raise and blah blah blah, but this is in the way. Yeah, not a whole lot of interesting things going on thus far. Um, just gonna check this back. Yep. There's not a whole lot to talk about at the moment. It feels a little bit boring. I don't really edit my videos or filter them. Occasionally, there's a really boring video. I will end up not putting it out, but it doesn't happen too often. Just a mixed strategy hand, rolling a higher number, we're going to end up using a smaller river bet. Basically, just like kind of like using a sizing that we can bet something like ace 7, ace 5, whatever. It's pretty hard to have natural bluffs. If I rolled a lower number, I would have been using a larger bet. Ace 8, I'm going to be opening from MP. It's fairly loose, but we do have a weaker big blind player, and I really want to get in the pot with that kind of an individual. So he decides to just pot into us. We'll go with the call. River, when we end up rivering the 9, I believe with the 9 of hearts, we end up just checking this. We play this as a check raise. Essentially, like, Jaiki's trying to pick a sizing that makes sense for his missed flush draws and da-da-da-da-da. Or he's turning some hands like 3s, 5s into a bluff. And then he just has to, like, fold some ace-x here at some frequency and call, then call some. Jack's no good. And again, we just need to continue this on the turn. Mixing over limp and call with the 8s. he decides to probe into this, I'm just going to raise. Like, he obviously will have aces to nines here, but he's going to have a lot more sevens to deuces, and then our hand in particular needs a lot of protection against his overcard sort of random bluffs. Da 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 da. I think it's a spot where we're just going to try to pile in loads of money against the recreational, and when money goes in, we're generally getting it in like fairly okay. I'm very, very excited to be making YouTube videos again. Like, it's been kind of sad not to make any, and this is a little bit more of a. I don't know these two individuals. I'm just going to raise Jack 8. That's very loose, but against at least probably one likely recreational player, then maybe someone else who I don't even. I mean, I don't really recognize either of these guys. It's somewhat likely that they're both whales, and if that's the case, we should definitely just raise Jack 8 offsuit. So, yeah. I'm very excited to be making videos again. I love making videos. I'm not a great poker player, but I'm kind of like okay, and I learned when I do this, and I get to interact with people, and I enjoy all of that. Versus 12, we're just going to pitch. Like, this just blocks a bunch of the most natural bluffs in his range that will be using this sizing. His cold calling range is kind of interesting. I'm curious about what. I mean, there is a rec in the big blind, so it actually ends up being able to be pretty wide, and I just check range in this situation. I don't mind like having a smaller bet here occasionally with this. Very occasionally. Just the number that I rolled was pretty high. Versus the min raise, just going to pitch. I think I have a lot of like king jack, all this sort of stuff. I semi don't believe he's going to find enough bluffs, and I don't even. I mean, I think with how quickly he min raised, I think he'd consider like ace five for a bit longer before he min raised. I think he's just got me beat here very often. Very, very hard for him to find a bluffing range, which is the reason why he ends up min raising. I have an 87, which is very close to the most passive option. I don't have many cold calls against 3x, but occasionally I do like to have some, and we do have a rec on the button, so I will mix in the occasional cold call against 3x with this rolling this high number. I'm fine with it. We're going to continue maybe the queen of clubs. I like to continue a lot wider than equilibrium, blind versus blind in these spots, but that's a bit too wide. It's pretty hard to find quote-unquote natural bluffs here from his perspective. Like in Baba's shoes, it's got to look fairly likely that I just end up having like fives or sevens or ace jack suited or something like that. I mean, me flatting 3 big blinds and then betting flop small, then overbetting the turn there. Yeah, pretty strong line for me. Regardless, needs to be in there, and it just means that I need to find more natural, or I just need to find more bluffs. I need to dig a bit deeper for bluffs, and in his range there, he's going to be very capped in my opinion. I mean, obviously he's going to be very capped, but we will see some people basically front door too many hands like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, all these kind of things. We're going to pitch this. Another wreck. We're going to fold the ace 8 though. when I say capped, I mean I'm not really trying to say capped. Like that's, I feel like I'm living in 2015. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. Um, I guess I think his range rolling a 30. I'm gonna have a raise here and go with the bet. Half pot seems appropriate. Can mix between over limp and ISO the queen jack. Very very high EV board texture here. Blind versus blind. The clubs are really good. King deuce, which is one of my weakest hands, is quite good. Given that King Jack suited ends up being three bet a hell of a lot and all this sort of stuff, we actually have some mixes with overbets. It's not the same as a lot of other spots. King Jack gets three bet a lot, and he doesn't have as many like two pairs like Queen 10, Ace 10 in this situation because those will three bet a fair amount. So we end up getting to use a lot of overbets here with just like thin value as well as strong hands. I believe versus this cold call range, if he constructs it correctly, we need to just find mix. Okay, we're gonna call. Thing is, like these wrecks can just do so fucking much with like stabbing fours and then doing whatever. But I think this particular hand just does a decent amount of blocking, given that like it blocks some of the 10x that he can call with. So we don't really want to scale up for a big bet, and then he'll end up calling a bunch of weak pocket pairs and like raising some ace x and da 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 da. I think the blockers there are fairly relevant. He does call an ace, which is fine. It's not a huge deal. This hand's pretty high frequency for bet. Could go slightly bigger. Could go a touch bigger. Occasionally I'll 3-bet this 10-8. Go the call this time. Just going to raise this about 30, 40, 50% of the time. Rolling 91, going with call. Queen 8's very loose, blind versus blind. And on the King 7-5, he's supposed to have a lot of like King 7 off, King 5 off, and like 7-5 off, that sort of stuff. Pretty good board for him. Rolling a high number, going to go with the check. Just blocking river here. I thought I went with the check already. You'll see me go from like a quarter to a third pot in a lot of these like river probe situations, and I'll change it up. It's not actually based on what I'm like, what I want to get called by or this or that. It's fairly balanced, and it's very much a function of how valuable the sort of region of hand I'm representing is and how prevalent it is in my range and what sort of hands he's going to get to the river with. Like there are a lot of spots where like the value of one pair is very high, so we end up using even like half pot bets as opposed to blocks or maybe even larger as far as the smaller bet is concerned. Rolling at 82, I'm going to go with the call, but I like to 4-bet this hand a lot. Very clear folds, very often. Actually, I kind of want to look at that later. Huh. And again, these are very, very polarized situations. We end up 3-betting quite large. So I want to try to stick to keeping these videos about 20 minutes. So maybe what I'll do is I'll make this part 1, and then I'll continue into part 2 or something of that nature. This is folding. Queen 6 is about the threshold if there are a bunch of regulars behind. So, anyways, guys, thanks for watching. This is AomIsHot22, and peace out.